All right, so we're diving into a story today that I think a lot of people think they know, but
Yeah.
there's always more to uncover.
Always something, yeah.
We're talking Watergate.
Okay.
Not just the break-in, but
Yeah.
the whole web of intrigue and paranoia
Yeah.
that brought down a president.
And you know what's so captivating about Watergate, to me at least, is how it really speaks to
Oh, yeah.
the power dynamics in America,
Yeah.
you know? And we're going to see how a seemingly small event
Right.
can trigger this,
This chain reaction.
like a chain reaction, exposing these cracks in the system
Yeah.
and revealing these like human flaws, you know?
Right. Right behind this facade of power.
Exactly. Yeah.
To help us navigate this,
Yeah.
we're using a fantastic podcast episode
Okay.
with Dr. Catherine Brownell,
All right.
who's a historian who really gets into
Oh, wow.
the nitty-gritty of Watergate's lasting impact,
Cool.
particularly on the media.
Very relevant, especially today as we grapple with our own
Oh my gosh, yes.
era of political division and media fragmentation.
Yes.
It's fascinating to see how the echoes of Watergate are
Yeah.
still like reverberating through our society.
Okay, so picture this. It's June 1972. Richard Nixon's practically guaranteed a second term as president, right?
Right.
He's up against George McGovern.
Yep.
And polls are showing a landslide victory in Nixon's favor.
Wow.
You'd think he'd be feeling pretty confident, right?
On the surface, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think if we dig a little deeper,
Right.
we start to see a different picture emerging.
Okay.
And Dr. Brownell points out
Okay.
that despite his outward success,
Mm-hmm.
Nixon was a man haunted by his past.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
particularly his losses
Ah.
in the 1960 and 1962 elections.
It's interesting. You'd think a sitting president
Right.
wouldn't be dwelling on those old defeats.
You would think so, but for Nixon,
Yeah.
those losses weren't just political setbacks. They were like personal wounds.
Oh.
And he believed that the media had unfairly targeted him,
Okay.
portraying him in a negative light
Mm,
and contributing to his defeats.
interesting.
And this like deep-seated resentment
Right.
really fueled a paranoia
Oh, wow.
that would ultimately lead to his downfall.
So this paranoia is brewing beneath the surface.
Yeah.
And then in the midst of this seemingly smooth path to reelection, something happens that throws everything into chaos.
Okay.
The Watergate break-in.
A Watergate.
5 men are caught breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel.
Okay.
Now, you might think this sounds like something straight out of a spy thriller,
Right.
but the reality is these burglars were anything but professional.
Yeah.
The podcast episode mentions this incredible detail.
What is it?
The burglars used tape to secure a door latch,
What?
and that flimsy attempt at stealth
Oh my gosh.
is actually what tipped off the security guard.
It's almost comical,
Right.
the sheer clumsiness of it all.
Yeah, it's wild.
But this like seemingly minor incident
Right.
quickly unravels into something much bigger.
Okay.
And it becomes clear that this wasn't just a random break-in.
Yeah.
It was part of a coordinated effort to sabotage the Democrats.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, because behind this break-in
Yeah.
was a group known as the Committee to Re-elect the President,
Uh-huh.
or CREEP.
Creep. Yeah.
And you got to admit,
I know, right?
even the name itself sounds kind of sinister.
So sinister, yeah.
CREEP was essentially Nixon's secret weapon,
Okay.
an organization dedicated to winning the election by any means necessary.
Oh, wow.
So we're not just talking about a few campaign pranks here.
Right.
What kind of activities was CREEP actually involved in?
So Dr. Brownell highlights that Creep's tactics were shockingly dirty.
Okay.
They planted fake news stories, sabotaged political opponents, and they even went as far as disrupting the campaigns of Democratic candidates
Oh.
by booking large blocks of hotel rooms under fake names,
Wow.
preventing the candidates and their staff from finding accommodations.
That's pretty underhanded.
Yeah, totally underhanded.
It seems like they were operating outside the bounds of any ethical or legal norms.
Exactly. And leading this pack of political operatives
Okay.
was a man named Charles Colson.
Okay.
described by some as Nixon's evil genius.
Evil genius, wow.
Polson was deeply involved in all sorts of shady dealings,
Whoa.
feeding Nixon's paranoia and encouraging him to use any means necessary to secure victory.
It's like something out of a political thriller.
I know, right?
You've got this atmosphere of paranoia
Yeah.
and this group operating in the shadows, willing to do whatever it takes to win.
Yeah.
But it all comes back to Nixon, right?
It all comes back to Nixon.
Yeah.
And this is where Dr. Brownell's analysis is really interesting. She argues that Nixon's deep-seated distrust of the media, stemming from those earlier election losses, led him to create a secret recording system in the Oval Office.
Really?
He wanted to control the narrative, to have a record of everything that was said.
And this is what ultimately becomes his undoing, right?
Yeah.
The smoking gun.
Exactly.
That proves his involvement in the Watergate cover-up.
The tapes, which Nixon fought so hard to keep secret, reveal him discussing ways to obstruct the investigation and silence witnesses.
So imagine, it's 1973.
Okay.
And the Senate Watergate hearings are underway.
Wow.
These hearings, broadcast live on television, are gripping the nation.
Yeah.
For the first time, Americans are seeing the inner workings of the presidency laid bare, and the picture isn't pretty.
And you know what's fascinating?
What?
Public television even replays the hearings in full each evening.
Oh, wow.
So even if you miss them during the day, you could catch up at night. It was a moment when the entire country was tuned in to the unfolding drama, glued to their television sets, waiting to see what would happen next.
It's almost hard to imagine that level of national engagement with politics today.
Right. But that's the power that Watergate had.
Yeah.
It was a national obsession, a story that touched every aspect of American life. And it ultimately led to a profound shift in how Americans view the presidency and the power dynamics at play in Washington.
Right.
But we'll delve deeper into that after a quick.
Hold on. I think we need to pause here and let all of that sink in for a moment. We've gone from a seemingly minor break-in to a shadowy organization engaging in dirty tricks to the revelation of secret tapes that expose a presidential cover-up.
Yeah.
A lot to process, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show how one event can trigger a cascade of consequences, revealing hidden truths and challenging our assumptions about the people in power.
And remember, all of this is happening against the backdrop of the Vietnam War.
Right.
Social and political upheaval, like a real sense of distrust in the government.
Right.
It's a powder keg of a moment.
Yeah, it is.
In American history.
And what we're going to explore next is how Watergate shattered the image of the presidency.
Right.
Leading to a wave of cynicism and distrust that continues to shape our political landscape today.
But before we jump into that, let's take a moment to consider what stands out to you so far.
Okay.
What's surprising?
Yeah.
What's intriguing? What makes this story still relevant after all these years? We'll be back in a moment to continue our deep dive into Watergate.
Sounds good. You know, as we pick back up on this story of secrets and betrayals, it's important to remember just how deeply Watergate impacted the American psyche.
It really did. Yeah.
It wasn't just about a break-in or even a cover-up.
Right.
It was a fundamental breach of trust.
Yeah, and Dr. Brownhill makes a compelling point in the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
She argues that this loss of faith in the presidency, this feeling that the system itself was broken, actually had a profound impact on the media landscape.
That's fascinating. How so?
So remember, Watergate unfolds right as cable television is starting to emerge. And both Nixon, with his deep suspicion of the media and his critics, who saw the power of the major networks as potentially dangerous. They were both looking for ways to decentralize that media power.
Interesting.
So they saw cable as a way to break up this perceived monopoly. To give more people a voice, to create a more diverse media ecosystem. Which sounds like a positive thing on the surface.
It does, yeah. At the time, it was seen as a way to really democratize information. But Dr. Brownell points out that this fragmentation of the media landscape, while seemingly empowering, also creates unintended consequences.
Like what?
Well, think about it. When everyone has their own, curated news feed, their own set of sources, it becomes harder to agree on a shared set of facts.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
People can easily retreat into echo chambers, consuming only information that reinforces their existing beliefs.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So instead of fostering a more informed and engaged citizenry,
Right.
this fragmentation actually contributes to polarization.
Yes.
And makes it harder to have productive conversations across ideological divides.
So she's saying that this fragmented media landscape, where truth becomes increasingly subjective and difficult to discern, is a direct legacy of Watergate.
Exactly. It's a world that Nixon himself, with his obsession with controlling the narrative, might have inadvertently helped create.
That's a really thought-provoking point.
Yeah.
It's almost ironic that this push to decentralize media power, which started with good intentions, ends up creating a system where misinformation and political spin can thrive.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder if we're any better equipped today to handle a situation like Watergate.
Exactly.
With all the challenges
of
navigating our current media environment.
It's definitely a question worth considering.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the immediate aftermath of Watergate.
Okay.
Nixon resigns in disgrace.
Yeah.
Becoming the first and only U.S. president to do so.
Wow. What happens next?
Well, Gerald Ford steps into the presidency, facing this daunting task of restoring faith in the government and healing a nation deeply divided by scandal. And one of his first and most controversial acts is to pardon Nixon for any crimes he may have committed while in office.
Now, this pardon is a pivotal moment.
It is.
And Dr. Brownell really delves into its lasting impact.
It sparked outrage among many Americans who saw it as a betrayal of justice, a sign that the powerful were above the law. And it fueled this cynicism and distrust that many people already felt toward the government. And it raised questions about whether the pardon was truly an act of national healing or a calculated political move to protect the Republican Party.
So those questions about the pardon, about whether justice was truly served, continue to linger today.
Absolutely.
And it's a reminder that the legacy of Watergate is more than just a historical footnote. It's a story with ongoing relevance.
Absolutely.
And it speaks to this bigger theme of accountability. How do we hold our leaders responsible for their actions? What mechanisms are in place to ensure that justice is served even at the highest levels of power?
These are questions that we're still grappling with today.
I know,
in a political landscape that often feels as polarized and contentious as it was during the Watergate era.
But remember, Watergate also shows us the importance of a free press, the power of investigative journalism to uncover the truth and hold those in power accountable. It's a reminder that we, the people, have a role to play in safeguarding our democracy, in demanding transparency and speaking out against injustice.
And that's where things get really interesting, because the story of Watergate isn't just about the past. It's about the choices we make today, the information we consume, the conversations we have. It's about how we engage with our democracy and how we hold our leaders accountable.
And Dr. Brownell makes a really thought-provoking point about this. She argues that Watergate, despite its negative consequences, also had a silver lining.
How so?
It led to reforms that strengthened our system of checks and balances, made government more transparent, and empowered the press to play a more active role in holding power to account.
So while it exposed the flaws in our system, it also forced us to confront those flaws and make changes.
Exactly. And that's an important lesson to remember as we navigate our own era of political challenges. We need to be vigilant to question our assumptions and to engage in thoughtful and informed dialogue.
Because as we've seen, even in a democracy as established as ours, power can be abused, trust can be broken, and the very foundations of our system can be shaken.
But Watergate also shows us that we have the power to learn from our mistakes, to strengthen our institutions, and to build a more resilient democracy.
And that brings us to the heart of what makes Watergate so compelling, so relevant, even after all these years.
Absolutely.
It's not just a story about a president who abused his power and the people who brought him down. It's a story about the ongoing struggle to uphold the principles of democracy, to ensure that power is used responsibly, and to safeguard the rights of all citizens.
And in a world where those principles are increasingly under threat,
Right.
it's a story that we need to keep telling.
Mm.
A story that demands our attention.
Yeah.
And compels us to reflect on our own role in shaping the future of our nation.
Now, as we move toward the conclusion of this deep dive,
Yeah.
let's consider how the lessons of Watergate resonate in your own life.
Right. Think about the information you consume, the sources you trust, the conversations you have about politics.
Yeah.
How can you apply the lessons of Watergate to be a more informed and engaged citizen?
We'll be back in a moment to wrap up our exploration of this pivotal moment in American history.
It's striking how this one event, this break-in, acts as like a prism,
Right.
refracting light onto so many facets of American society.
Oh, yeah.
Politics, media, the presidency itself. It's like holding up a mirror to who we were then and asking, how much has really changed?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the most enduring legacies of Watergate is this profound shift in how Americans view the presidency.
Right.
Before the scandal, there was a certain reverence for the office.
Yeah, definitely.
A trust in the person holding that immense power.
Yeah, you're right. Even with past presidential missteps, there was this sense that, like, the president was acting in the best interest of the nation.
Right.
But Watergate it shatters that illusion.
It really does.
Yeah.
It reveals the dark side of executive power.
Right.
The potential for corruption, the danger of unchecked ambition, and it leaves a lasting scar on the public psyche.
It does.
We see this reflected in the cynicism and distrust that many Americans feel toward politicians and government institutions.
Oh, for sure.
Which persists to this day.
Yeah, it's like the nation went through this collective trauma, and that trauma just continues to shape our political discourse today.
It raises some uncomfortable questions about the nature of power.
Yeah.
If a president, someone who's sworn oath to uphold the Constitution, could engage in such a blatant abuse of power, what does that say about the system itself?
Yeah, it really makes you think. It forces us to confront the limits of our institutions, the importance of checks and balances, the need for constant vigilance in safeguarding our democracy.
Because as we've seen, power corrupts.
It does.
And absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
Watergate serves as a stark reminder
Absolutely.
of that timeless truth.
It reminds us that we, the people, have a responsibility to hold our leaders accountable, to demand transparency, and to speak out against injustice.
That's the real takeaway from Watergate, isn't it?
I think so.
It's not just a historical event. To be studied and analyzed, it's a call to action, a reminder that we all have a role to play in preserving and strengthening our democracy.
So as you go about your day, as you consume news, as you engage in conversations about politics, remember the lessons of Watergate.
Yes.
Ask yourself, what can I do to ensure that our institutions remain strong, that our leaders are held accountable, and that our democracy thrives?
Because the story of Watergate isn't over.
It's not, no.
It's a story that continues to be written with every vote we cast, every conversation we have, every action we take.
We hope this deep dive into Watergate has given you a new perspective on this pivotal moment in American history.
Absolutely.
And more importantly, we hope it's sparked some reflection on the power dynamics at play in our own time.
Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep those conversations going.
Yeah.
Because an informed and engaged citizenry is the best defense against the abuse of power.
For sure.
That's it for our deep dive today.
Great. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.